The frozen earth fought back against every strike of the shovel, as if the mountain itself refused to accept another body. Silas McGraw's breath came in ragged clouds in the pre-dawn darkness, his hands raw and bleeding through worn leather gloves. The grave had to be deep enough. The wolves and bears would come otherwise, and he couldn't bear the thought of Rachel's body being torn apart by scavengers. The wind howled through the pines like a chorus of mourning women, driving ice crystals against his weathered face. He'd been digging since midnight, when the fever finally took her. 3 days she'd burned, her skin like fire beneath his calloused hands, her eyes seeing things that weren't there. He'd held her through it all, spooning water between her cracked lips, whispering promises he knew he couldn't keep. "Just a little longer, darling," he'd said. "The fever's breaking. You'll see." But the fever hadn't broken. It had consumed her, leaving nothing but a cold shell in their marriage bed. Silas paused, leaning heavily on the shovel handle. The first pale light of dawn was creeping over the eastern peaks, painting the snow-covered slopes in shades of rose and gold. Rachel had loved the sunrise, said it reminded her that God gave folks a new chance every morning. He wondered if God was watching now, if he cared that another good woman was being planted in this unforgiving ground. The grave was finally deep enough. Silas climbed out, his joints protesting after hours of labor in the bitter cold. Inside the cabin, Rachel lay wrapped in their wedding quilt, the one her mother had sewn with tiny stitches and big dreams. He dressed her in her blue calico dress, the one she'd worn when they'd spoken their vows just 4 months ago in Denver. Her hair, still soft and brown as autumn leaves. He'd braided the way she liked it. He carried her out gently, as if she might wake. She weighed nothing now, this woman who'd been so full of life. The consumption had eaten her from the inside out, leaving her frail as a bird. He laid her in the grave with care, tucking the quilt around her, placing her Bible on her chest. The small gold ring on her finger caught the morning light, standing there at the edge of that dark hole. Silas remembered other graves, too many to count. Boys in blue and gray scattered across battlefields from Antietam to Appomattox. He'd thought when the war ended, he'd be done with death. Thought he could outrun it here in these mountains, where the air was clean and the world was simple. Rachel had saved him from the darkness that followed him home from the war. He'd been drinking himself to death in a Denver saloon when she'd walked in looking for her father. Something about the way she'd stood there, chin up despite the leering men, had sobered him faster than any temperance sermon. She'd looked right through the dirt and whiskey stink and seen something worth saving. "You're better than this place," she'd said simply, and somehow, when she said it, he'd believed it. They'd married within a month, scandalizing her proper family. She'd followed him into these mountains without complaint, leaving behind comfort and society for a one-room cabin and a hard life. She'd made it a home somehow, with checkered curtains at the window and wildflowers in a cracked pitcher. She'd laughed at his poor attempts at cooking, taught him to read from her Bible, held him when the nightmares came. And now she was gone, and the darkness was creeping back in at the edges of his vision. Silas began to shovel the dirt back into the grave. Each spadeful felt like a betrayal. He should have taken her to town when the fever started, should have found a doctor, should have done something more than hold her hand and watch her slip away. But the nearest town was 3 days' ride in good weather, and the storm had made travel impossible. By the time it cleared, it was too late. He worked methodically, trying not to think. The sun climbed higher, but brought no warmth. When the grave was filled, he gathered stones to cover it, protection against the animals. Each stone he placed was a goodbye. Goodbye to her smile. Goodbye to her singing while she worked. Goodbye to the future they'd planned, the children they'd wanted, the life they'd build together. The marker was simple, a wooden cross he'd fashioned from pine boards. He'd carved her name and dates with shaking hands. Rachel McGraw, 1850 to 1873, beloved wife. 23 years old, a lifetime unlived. Silas stood there until his feet went numb in his boots. The wind had died down, leaving an awful stillness. Even the birds were quiet. The world felt empty, drained of color despite the bright morning sun. He thought about joining her. It would be easy enough. There was rope in the barn, cliffs all around. No one would miss him. No one even knew they were up here. But Rachel wouldn't want that, even at the end, burning with fever. She'd gripped his hand and made him promise to live. "Don't let the darkness take you," she'd whispered. "Promise me." He'd promised. Now he had to figure out how to keep that promise. Silas turned away from the grave and walked back to the cabin. Inside, everything still smelled like her. The lavender soap she'd hoarded, the herbs she'd hung from the rafters, her shawl on the chair, her boots by the door. He couldn't bear it. He grabbed his rifle, his possibles bag, and headed for the woods. He'd check his trap lines, maybe hunt, anything to avoid the empty cabin and the freshly turned earth behind it. The forest was his refuge now, among the pines and aspens, following game trails and creek beds. He could almost forget. He moved silently, a skill learned through years of army scouting and refined by mountain living. The snow was deep in places, crusty in others. He read the signs automatically. Deer had passed this way at dawn. A mountain cat was hunting the ridgeline. Wolves had taken an elk in the valley below. He checked his traps methodically. 2 rabbits, their fur pristine white for winter. He reset the snares with practiced ease. Food didn't matter much now, but the motions of survival kept his hands busy and his mind occupied. By afternoon, he'd made his way to the frozen stream where he drew water. The ice was thick, requiring hard work with the axe to break through. As he knelt to fill his water bucket, something caught his eye. Blood on the snow, fresh and bright red against the white. Silas froze, instantly alert. The blood trail led upstream, following the creek bed. Not an animal. The pattern was wrong. These were human footprints, staggering and uneven. Someone was hurt, moving slowly. His first instinct was to turn away. He wanted no part of other people's troubles. He had enough of his own, but the blood was increasing, the footprints becoming more erratic. Whoever it was wouldn't last long in this cold. Rachel's voice echoed in his memory. "We're all God's children. Silas, we help each other. That's what makes us human." Cursing under his breath, Silas followed the trail. It led up the streambed, through a thick stand of willows, into a small clearing he rarely visited. There, collapsed against a boulder, was a figure in a torn brown dress. A woman, young from what he could see, her dark hair tangled with snow and pine needles. Blood seeped from a gash on her leg, staining the snow around her. She wasn't moving. Silas approached cautiously. Rifle ready. Could be a trap. He'd seen such things during the war, wounded soldiers used as bait. But she was alone, her skin pale as death, lips blue with cold. When he touched her neck, searching for a pulse, her skin was ice cold, but he felt a faint flutter beneath his fingers. Still alive, but barely. He should leave her. Taking her to his cabin would only bring complications he didn't need. She might die anyway, and then he'd have another grave to dig. But his hands were already moving, checking her wounds, assessing the damage. The gash on her leg was deep but clean, probably from a fall on the ice. Her ankle was swollen, possibly broken. Most dangerous was the cold. She was deep into hypothermia. Silas made his decision. He couldn't carry both the woman and his rifle, so he hid the gun in a hollow log, marking the spot. Then he lifted her carefully. She weighed more than Rachel had, but was still a slight burden for a man used to hard labor. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he caught a scent of rose water beneath the blood and fear sweat. The journey back to the cabin was hard. The snow had begun to fall again, thick flakes that obscured the trail. Twice he had to stop and rest, sheltering the woman with his body. She moaned once, her eyes fluttering open to reveal a glimpse of green before closing again. When he finally reached the cabin, the last daylight was fading. He kicked open the door and carried her to the bed where Rachel had died just hours before. No time for sentiment now. He built up the fire until the cabin was almost hot, then began the careful work of saving this stranger's life. Her dress was frozen to her body in places. He cut it away with his knife, trying not to look at more than necessary. Layers of petticoats, a corset that seemed designed to squeeze the life out of a body. Beneath it all, she was covered in bruises, some fresh, some fading to yellow. She'd been running from something, or someone. The leg wound needed cleaning. He heated water, added salt, cleaned the gash as best he could. She cried out when he poured whiskey on it, but didn't wake. The ankle was sprained, not broken, a small mercy. He bound both injuries with strips torn from clean flour sacks. The hypothermia was harder to treat. He wrapped her in every blanket he owned, placed heated stones wrapped in cloth at her feet. Slowly, painfully slowly. Warmth returned to her body. Her breathing deepened. The blue faded from her lips. Silas sat back in his chair, suddenly exhausted. What had he done? Brought a strange woman into his home on the very day he'd buried his wife, a woman who was clearly in trouble, who might bring that trouble to his door. But she was alive, in a day of death. He'd pulled one soul back from the edge. Maybe that counted for something. As night fell and the storm picked up outside, Silas kept watch. The woman slept fitfully, occasionally muttering words he couldn't make out. Once she called out a name, William, her voice full of fear. He wondered who William was, what he'd done to put that fear in her voice. The fire crackled. Wind shook the cabin walls, and Silas McGraw sat in the darkness, caught between the grave outside and the mysterious woman fighting for life in his bed, wondering what tomorrow would bring to this mountain that had already taken so much. The woman's eyes snapped open like a trapped animal's, wild, green, and full of terror. She jerked upright in the bed, then cried out as pain shot through her injured leg. Her hands clutched the blankets to her chest, and she pressed herself back against the cabin wall, as far from Silas as she could get. "Easy," Silas said from his chair by the fire, keeping his voice low and his hands visible. "You're safe." Her gaze darted around the cabin, taking in the rifle on the wall, the door, the single window, looking for escape routes. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Where am I?" "My cabin. Found you half frozen by the creek yesterday. You've been out for near a full day." She stared at him, studying his face in the firelight. Whatever she saw there didn't reassure her. Are you one of them? Did they send you?" "Don't know any of them. Ma'am, I live alone up here." "Alone?" She tested the word like it might be poisoned. Her eyes landed on something behind him, Rachel's shawl still draped over the chair. "What about your wife?" Silas's jaw tightened. "Buried her yesterday morning. The fever took her." Something shifted in the woman's expression. Not quite softening, but recognition maybe. One sufferer acknowledging another. She was quiet for a long moment, then asked, "My clothes? Had to cut them off. You were near frozen to death. There's a dress in the trunk there. My wife's. You can have it." She nodded slowly, still wary. "I need to leave. You can't walk on that leg for at least a week. And there's nowhere to go. Nearest town is 3 days' ride in good weather. Storm's been blowing 2 days now." Panic flashed across her features. She tried to swing her legs out of bed, gasped at the pain, fell back against the pillows. "You don't understand. They'll find me. They'll come here." "Who'll come?" She pressed her lips together, shaking her head. Trust was clearly not something she gave easily. Silas understood that. He stood slowly, moved to the stove where a pot of broth had been simmering. He ladled some into a bowl, set it on the table with a spoon. "You need to eat," he said. "Been 2 days at least since you had food, judging by the state of you." "I can't pay you." "Didn't ask for payment." Men always want payment. There was a bitter edge to her voice. Years of hard lessons learned. Silas turned away. Burying the flare of anger, her words sparked. "I'll be in the barn. Eat or don't. Your choice." He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Behind him, he heard her struggling to sit up, pride warring with necessity. He didn't look back. The barn was cold but familiar. His horses, Buck and Molly. nickered softly as he entered. He spent an hour mucking stalls, checking hooves, tasks that required no thought. When he finally returned to the cabin, the bowl was empty and the woman was wearing Rachel's blue wool dress, sitting on the edge of the bed. She'd managed to tame her dark hair into a braid, though her hands shook with the effort. In Rachel's dress, she looked younger than he'd first thought, maybe 25, pretty in a sharp-featured way, with those watchful green eyes and a stubborn set to her jaw. "Thank you," she said stiffly. "For the food and the dress." Silas nodded, hanging his coat on the peg. "Got a name?" She hesitated. "Clara." "Just Clara?" "Just Clara's enough." He didn't push. Everyone was entitled to their secrets. "I'm Silas McGraw. You were in the war." It wasn't a question. Something about the way he moved, maybe, or the wariness that matched her own. "Cavalry scout. You?" "My husband was infantry." She looked away. "He died." There was more to that story. But Silas didn't pry. They sat in awkward silence, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Clara spoke again. "I should tell you, so you know what you've brought into your home." She took a shaky breath. "My husband, my second husband, died on our wedding night. 3 weeks ago. They say I poisoned him." Silas kept his expression neutral. "Did you?" A bitter laugh. "Would it matter if I said no? The whole town had already decided. William Whitmore was rich. I was poor. He was 63. I was young. Obviously, I married him for money and killed him for inheritance." She pulled the dress tighter around herself. "Never mind that I begged my father not to make the match. Never mind that William had a bad heart and everyone knew it. Never mind that his own son hired those men to hunt me down before I could claim what William left me. So you ran. What else could I do? Wait for a trial where the verdict was already decided? Let them hang me for something I didn't do?" Her voice cracked. "I took a horse and what money I could find and ran. Made it 2 days before they caught up. Lost them in the forest, but—" She gestured at her injured leg. The story had the ring of truth, or at least partial truth. Silas had seen enough injustice to believe it. Rich men's justice rarely favored poor women. "They'll keep looking," Clara continued. "William's son, Theodore, he won't stop. Can't have the scandal of his father's widow running free, and the money." She shook her head. "I don't even want the money. I just want to disappear." "Well," Silas said slowly, "you've disappeared about as far as anyone can get. No one comes up here in winter. Spring thaw's still 2 months off. You don't understand. If they find me here, with you—" "Then they find you. But they have to find you first, and that won't be easy. Storms covered your tracks by now. Could have gone any direction from where you lost them." Clara studied him. "Why are you helping me?" Silas looked at the fire. Truth was, he didn't know. Maybe because Rachel would have wanted him to. Maybe because he understood what it was like to run from something. Maybe because saving this stranger kept him from thinking about the fresh grave outside. "You needed help," he said simply. Over the next days, they developed an uneasy routine. Clara insisted on helping despite her injuries, mending clothes, cooking what simple meals their supplies allowed. She was a terrible cook, burning the cornbread and oversalting the stew. But Silas didn't complain. The activity seemed to calm her, gave her something to control. She slept fitfully, crying out in her dreams. Sometimes William's name, sometimes Theodore's, sometimes just wordless sounds of fear. Silas would lie awake on his pallet by the fire, listening to her nightmares and remembering his own. During the day, she was all sharp edges and careful distance. She thanked him precisely for everything, each meal, each bucket of water, the salve for her wounds. Like she was keeping a ledger, making sure she owed him nothing. When their hands accidentally touched passing a plate, she jerked back as if burned. "I know what you're thinking," she said one evening, apropos of nothing. Silas looked up from the leather he was mending. "Do you now?" "Young woman, older husband dies suddenly. Of course I killed him. That's what everyone thinks. I've found what everyone thinks is wrong more often than not." She gave him a sharp look. You don't wonder? Don't think maybe you've got a murderess under your roof? I've got a woman with a hurt leg and nowhere else to go. Rest is none of my business. Clara fell silent, but he could feel her watching him. Finally, she said, Your wife was lucky to have a husband who mourns her so. The words hit like a physical blow. Silas set down the leather, his hands suddenly unsteady. She deserved better than dying in this cabin, far from her family. She had you. At the end, she had you. Clara's voice was soft now, almost wistful. My first husband, James, he died alone in a field hospital while I was home praying for him. William died cursing me for a whore and a thief. Your Rachel, she died loved. Silas couldn't speak past the tightness in his throat. They sat in silence while the wind howled outside and the fire burned low. When he finally looked up, Clara was crying silently, tears tracking down her cheeks. I didn't poison him, she whispered, but I was glad when he died. Does that make me evil? Makes you human. She wiped her face with her sleeve, trying to compose herself. I should hate all men. My father for selling me off, James for dying, William for everything, Theodore for hunting me like an animal. I should hate you for seeing me weak. But you don't. I don't know what I feel anymore. She looked at him then, really looked at him. You're different. You don't look at me like prey. Silas thought about all the ways men could destroy women, all the casual cruelties he'd witnessed. My mother raised me better than that, and Rachel, she wouldn't have stood for it. Tell me about her, please. So he did. Talked about Rachel's laugh, her stubbornness, her faith that people were basically good despite all evidence to the contrary. How she'd made their rough cabin into a home. How she'd sung while she worked. Hymns and folk songs all mixed together. How even dying, she'd been more concerned about him than herself. Clara listened without interrupting, her expression soft in the firelight. When he finished, she said quietly, I would have liked her. She would have liked you. Would have said you had spine. Spine, Clara almost smiled. That's one way to put it. As the days passed, the sharp edge of wariness between them began to dull. Clara, still startled at sudden sounds, still checked the window obsessively for riders. But she also began to relax in small ways. She hummed while she worked. Not songs exactly, just tuneless sounds. She asked about the books on the shelf, admitted sheepishly that she could read only a little. William didn't like me reading, said it gave women ideas. Rachel believed everyone should read, said it was how we talk to people across time and distance. Could you read something? Aloud. I mean, the evenings are so long. So Silas began reading to her after supper. Poetry, mostly. The one book besides the Bible that Rachel had brought to the mountains. Wordsworth and Byron, Shelley and Keats. Clara would sit by the fire, her injured leg propped up, watching the flames while his voice filled the cabin. One night, after a particularly moving piece about loss and remembrance, she said, I told William I was barren, so he wouldn't, so there would be no expectations. But it wasn't true. Silas waited, knowing there was more. I had a child, with James, a little girl. She lived 3 days. Her voice was steady, but her hands twisted in her lap. I thought I'd die from the grief. Then James's letter came saying he was gone too, and I wanted to die. My father found me with his razor. That's when he decided to marry me off to William. Said I needed a firm hand. Clara, I dream about her sometimes. My little girl. Dream she lived, that she's out there somewhere. Wondering why I gave her away. She looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. Do you think that makes me crazy? I think that makes you a mother. Something passed between them then, an understanding deeper than words. They'd both lost what couldn't be recovered. Both carried ghosts. Maybe that was enough, not to heal, but to recognize another walking wounded. That night, when Clara woke crying from another nightmare, Silas moved his chair closer to the bed, not touching, just present. She reached out in the darkness, and he took her hand. They sat like that until dawn, her fingers cold but steady in his, neither speaking. It was the first time in weeks either had held another human being without fear or duty or death between them. It was enough. For now, it was enough. The blizzard struck without mercy, turning the world beyond the cabin walls into a howling white void. For 3 days, the wind screamed like a living thing, driving snow through every tiny gap in the logs. Silas had weathered storms before, but this one seemed intent on tearing the mountain apart. He kept the fire burning constantly, feeding it with carefully rationed wood from the pile inside. They'd need to be sparing if the storm lasted much longer. He'd have to venture out to the woodshed, and in this weather, that could be deadly. Clara had taken over the cooking completely now. Her leg healed enough to move around the cabin. She'd learned to manage the wood stove's temperamental ways, producing cornbread that was only slightly burned and beans that were mostly edible. She worked in concentrated silence, as if the simple tasks could wall out the storm and everything else beyond these walls. On the second night of the blizzard, as they sat listening to the wind try to peel the roof away, Clara suddenly asked, "Do you have any whiskey left?" Silas raised an eyebrow. "Didn't take you for a drinking woman." "I'm not, but—" She gestured helplessly at the storm. "It sounds like the world's ending out there." He fetched the bottle from the high shelf, poured 2 tin cups. The whiskey was rough. Homemade stuff from the last time he'd been to town. Clara coughed at the first sip, eyes watering. "Lord, that's awful. Gets the job done." They drank slowly, the alcohol warming them from inside. Clara's usual rigid posture began to soften. She pulled her feet up under her in the chair, looking younger, less guarded. "I keep thinking they're out there," she said. "Theodore's men, waiting for the storm to break so they can take me back. Nobody's out in this. Even wolves have better sense. You don't know Theodore. He's like his father. Once he decides something belongs to him, he won't stop." She took another sip. "William told me, on our wedding night, said I belong to the Whitmore family now, body and soul. Said I should be grateful." Silas said nothing, but his grip tightened on his cup. "I tried to run that night, still in my wedding dress. William caught me at the door, dragged me back by my hair." She touched her scalp absently, remembering. "That's when his heart gave out. He was holding me down. And then he just stopped, clutched his chest, turned purple, fell over dead. Clara, I sat there for an hour before I called for help. Just sat there, watching him die, feeling free. When the doctor came, I was the grieving widow, but Theodore saw the bruises on my arms, my torn dress. He knew, and he decided I must have done something to cause it." The wind gusted, making the cabin walls creak. Silas added another log to the fire, choosing his words carefully. Man's heart gives out while attacking his wife. Seems clear enough who's to blame. Not in their world. In their world, wives submit, wives obey, wives don't fight back. She laughed bitterly. "My mother tried to warn me before she died. Said I had too much fight in me for my own good. Said it would get me killed one day. Your mother was wrong." Clara looked at him sharply. "Was she? Here I am, hiding in a cabin with a stranger, running for my life. Maybe if I'd been meeker." "You'd be dead." Silas met her gaze steadily. "Maybe not your body, but your soul. Seen it happen. Women ground down until there's nothing left but a shell going through the motions. Is that what happened to Rachel? Did you grind her down?" The question should have angered him, but he heard the real need beneath it, the need to know that not all men were William. "Rachel was the strongest person I knew, stronger than me. She saved me, not the other way around." He stared into the fire, remembering. "After the war, I was broken, drinking myself to death, picking fights, hoping someone would finish what the rebels couldn't. Rachel saw through all that. Didn't try to fix me or change me, just stood beside me until I remembered how to stand on my own. And then she died. And then she died." The words were ash in his mouth. "But she lived first, lived fierce and bright and true. That matters." Clara was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, "I haven't lived, not really, just survived. Surviving's not nothing. But it's not living, is it? I went from my father's house to James's house to William's house. Never my own house, never my own life." She finished her whiskey in one burning swallow. "Do you know what I wanted to be when I was young?" Silas waited. "A teacher. I loved books, loved learning. There was a school in town that needed a teacher, and I begged my father to let me apply. He laughed, said no man would marry a woman who thought she was smarter than him." "Were you smarter than him?" A ghost of a smile. "Yes, that was the problem." They'd moved closer without realizing it, drawn by the fire and the storm and the strange intimacy of shared truth. Silas could smell the rosewater she still somehow carried, mixed with wood smoke and whiskey. "Storm's getting worse," he said, standing abruptly. "I need to check the horses." "In this? They spook in weather like this. Need to make sure they're settled." He bundled into his coat, wrapped a scarf around his face. Clara stood too, wobbling slightly from the whiskey. "Be careful. Always am." The trip to the barn was like swimming through a frozen ocean. The wind hit him so hard he staggered, and the snow was already hip-deep in places. He fought his way forward, guided more by memory than sight. The horses were indeed nervous, rolling their eyes and stamping. He spoke to them soothingly, checked their water wasn't frozen, gave them extra grain. On the way back, the wind shifted, and for a moment he lost his bearings completely. The cabin had vanished in the white. He stood still, fighting down panic, trying to remember the exact angle from barn to house. One wrong turn and he'd wander off into the forest, freeze to death within sight of warmth. Then he saw it, a faint glow. Clara had put the lamp in the window, a beacon in the storm. He struggled toward it, finally crashing through the door in a cloud of snow and wind. Clara was right there, helping him out of his frozen coat, her hands quick and sure. "You damn fool! You could have died out there." Horses needed tending. The horses could have waited. Her voice was sharp with fear. "I already watched one person die. I won't watch another." They were standing close, her hands still on his arms. Something shifted in the air between them, storm electricity crackling even inside the cabin. Silas stepped back carefully. "I'm fine. You're not fine. You're half frozen." She pushed him toward the fire. "Sit, I'll make coffee." As she worked at the stove, Silas noticed she was favoring her injured leg less, moving with more confidence, healing. Soon she'd be able to travel. The thought brought an unexpected pang. "How long have you lived up here?" she asked, bringing him the coffee. 3 years. Came up after Rachel and I married. Don't you get lonely?" "Didn't have time to be lonely, with Rachel here." He paused. "Now, I don't think about it." "Liar." He looked up at her, startled by the directness. "You think about it. I can see it in the way you talk to the horses, the way you read those poems aloud like you're trying to fill the silence." She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "It's all right to be lonely. Doesn't mean you're weak. What about you, you lonely?" "I've been lonely my whole life, even in a house full of people, especially then." She stared at her coffee. "This is different. This is—" She didn't finish, but he thought he understood. This was the loneliness of choice rather than circumstance, the clean loneliness of solitude rather than the poisoned loneliness of being unseen in a crowd. The storm raged on. They ran low on firewood, and Silas had to break apart an old crate for kindling. Clara suggested they share blankets for warmth. Purely practical, but they both knew it was more than that. They sat together on the narrow bed, wrapped in every blanket the cabin held, not quite touching but aware of every inch between them. "Tell me about the war," Clara said into the darkness. "Nothing good to tell." "Tell me anyway." So he did. Told her about the mud and blood, the boys who died calling for their mothers, the things he'd done that still woke him at night. She listened without judgment, occasionally squeezing his hand when the words grew too heavy. Is that why you hide up here? To escape the memories? Can't escape what's inside your own head, but up here, at least it's quiet, clean. Nobody asking me to scout trails so they can ambush farm boys who barely know which end of a rifle to hold. You were following orders. So were they. Doesn't make any of us less dead. Clara turned to face him in the darkness. He could feel her breath on his face, warm and alive. You're not dead. Silas, you're the most alive person I've met. I'm just breathing. That's not the same as living, isn't it? Her hand found his face, fingers tracing the rough line of his jaw. You saved me, fed me, read poetry to me, risked your life for your horses. That sounds like living to me. He caught her hand, meaning to move it away. Instead, he found himself holding it against his cheek, starved for the simple human warmth of it. Clara, I know, she whispered. I know we can't. I know there's too much. Rachel and William and everything else. But just for tonight. Can we pretend? Can we pretend we're just two people who found each other in a storm? He should have said no. Should have moved back to his chair by the fire, maintained the careful distance that kept them both safe. Instead, he turned his head and pressed his lips to her palm, felt her shiver. They held each other through the night. Nothing more. No kisses, no promises, no crossing of final lines. Just two bodies curved together for warmth and comfort. Two hearts beating against the storm. When Clara finally slept. Silas stayed awake, memorizing the feeling of her weight against him, knowing it couldn't last. By morning, the storm had broken. Pale sunlight filtered through the frost-covered window, revealing a world transformed. Everything was buried under feet of pristine snow, sparkling like diamond dust, beautiful and treacherous in equal measure. Clara woke slowly, then pulled away, not meeting his eyes. I should start breakfast. Clara, don't. Her voice was steady but sad. We both know what this was, and what it wasn't. She was right, of course. In the clarity of morning, the careful boundaries reasserted themselves. He was a grieving widower. She was a fugitive. Whatever comfort they'd found in the storm couldn't survive the harsh light of day. But as he watched her move around the cabin, humming tunelessly while she worked, Silas wondered if maybe that was enough. Maybe it was enough to know that two broken people could still offer each other shelter from the storm, even if only for a night. The world outside was frozen, dangerous, full of threats both natural and man-made. But inside the cabin, for now, there was warmth and coffee and the quiet understanding of shared survival. For now, that was everything. The days after the storm passed in careful avoidance. Clara threw herself into a frenzy of activity, scrubbing the already clean floor, reorganizing the meager food supplies, mending clothes that didn't need mending. Silas spent long hours outside, clearing snow, hunting, checking trap lines that could have waited. They moved around each other like dancers who'd forgotten the steps, polite and distant, but the nights were harder. The cabin was too small for real separation. They still ate together by the fire, still shared the evening ritual of poetry. But now each word seemed weighted with meaning. When their eyes met across the table, both looked away quickly, as if burned. A week passed this way. Then came the night when the temperature plunged so low that ice formed inside the cabin walls. The fire couldn't keep pace with the cold. Silas piled on every piece of wood he dared, but still their breath came in visible clouds. It's too cold, Clara said through chattering teeth. She sat as close to the fire as possible, wrapped in 3 blankets. Still shivering, Silas knew what had to be done. We need to share heat again, just for warmth. Clara nodded, past pride now. They arranged themselves carefully on the bed, back to back, the blankets piled over them. But bodies have their own wisdom. In sleep, they turned to each other, seeking warmth and finding more. Silas woke to find Clara curled against his chest, her hand fisted in his shirt. He lay still, watching her sleep in the pre-dawn darkness. Her face was peaceful, the worried lines smoothed away. She looked young and vulnerable and achingly beautiful. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she didn't move, just looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. Then her hand uncurled from his shirt, moved up to touch his face. "I dream about you," she whispered. "Is that wrong?" "Clara, I know all the reasons why we shouldn't. Rachel's barely cold in her grave. I'm a wanted woman. You don't really know me, not truly, but Silas," her thumb traced his cheekbone. "I'm so tired of being afraid, of being alone. Aren't you?" He was. God help him. He was. The loneliness was like a physical weight, crushing him a little more each day. And here was this woman, damaged and fierce and beautiful, offering, what? Not love, surely, but connection, warmth. The reminder that he was still capable of feeling something other than grief. "Yes," he said roughly. "Yes, I'm tired of it." She kissed him then, tentative at first, as if she wasn't sure she remembered how. He held himself still, letting her set the pace, fighting every instinct that wanted to pull her closer. Her lips were chapped from the cold, tasting of coffee and something sweeter. When she pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "I'm not Rachel," she said. "I won't ever be Rachel." "I know. And I can't stay. When spring comes, I have to run. As far as I can. Maybe California. Maybe Mexico. Somewhere Theodore will never find me." "I know that too. So what are we doing?" He thought about it, trying to find words for something that defied language. "Maybe we're just two people trying to stay alive through the winter. Maybe that's enough." She studied his face, then nodded slowly. "Maybe it is." After that, the careful distance collapsed. They didn't share the marriage bed. That felt too much like betrayal. But they sat closer by the fire, hands touching as they passed plates. Clara sang while she worked. Old mountain songs her grandmother had taught her. When nightmares woke her, Silas was there, stroking her hair until she calmed. One afternoon, while Silas was out checking traps, Clara found Rachel's sewing basket. Inside, half-finished, was a tiny baby gown in soft white flannel. She held it up to the light, tears suddenly blurring her vision. When Silas returned, he found her crying over the little garment. She was pregnant, Clara said. Rachel was pregnant. Silas stood frozen in the doorway. Then, slowly, he crossed to where Clara sat. She didn't know for certain, thought maybe, but it was too early to tell, said we should wait to hope. "Oh, Silas." Clara pressed the little gown to her chest. "I'm so sorry." He sat beside her, and for the first time since the funeral, he let himself truly cry, great wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. Clara held him, rocking slightly, murmuring wordless comfort. They cried together for all the losses, Rachel and the baby that might have been, Clara's daughter who lived 3 days, James dead in a field hospital, all the might-have-beens that haunted them both. When the tears finally stopped, they were both wrung out, empty. Clara carefully folded the little gown and placed it back in the basket. "She would have been a wonderful mother." "Yes, you would have been a good father." He laughed bitterly. "I can barely take care of myself." "That's not true. You've taken care of me." She touched his hand. "You're a good man. Silas McGraw. Don't let grief make you forget that." That night, she came to him, slipped from her pallet by the fire to where he lay sleepless in the bed. No words, just the rustle of her nightgown falling to the floor, the whisper of blankets pulling back. He should have sent her away. Instead, he opened his arms. They came together with desperate hunger, two drowning souls clutching at each other. Her skin was pale in the moonlight, marked with old bruises from her flight, newer ones from the hard mountain life. He mapped each one with his lips, as if he could kiss away the hurt. "I'm not good at this," she whispered against his throat. "William said I was cold, unnatural." William was a fool. He showed her tenderness she'd never known, patience that made her cry, She gave him passion that burned through his careful control, made him feel alive in ways he'd forgotten. They moved together in the darkness, finding rhythms old as the mountains, losing themselves in sensation and connection. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, skin cooling in the night air. Clara traced patterns on his chest, over old scars from the war. "This doesn't make me yours," she said quietly. "I can't belong to anyone again. Don't want you to belong to me, just want you to be with me, for as long as you can." She raised up on one elbow to look at him. "You mean that? I'm not William. Clara, not your father. Don't want to own you or control you. Just—" He struggled for words. "Just want to know you're alive in the world, even if you're not with me. Want to know you're somewhere, living free." She kissed him then, soft and sweet. "No one's ever said that to me before." They were careful after that not to speak of love. What they had was too new, too fragile, built on too much loss. But something grew between them in the cold winter days. Something that might have become love given time and peace. Clara learned to shoot, Silas teaching her with patient repetition until she could hit a target at 50 yards. "Might need it," he said simply. She didn't argue. They both knew Theodore's men might still come. She taught him letters in return, guiding his hand as he struggled to write his own name. "Rachel tried," he said, frustrated. "Never could make sense of it." "You're trying to think too hard. Just let your hand remember the shapes." Slowly, painfully, he learned, first his name, then hers, then, one night, he surprised her by writing shakily, "Clara is beautiful." She cried and kissed him until neither could breathe. They told each other stories in the long evenings. Clara spoke of her childhood in Kansas, her grandmother who'd been a midwife and taught her herbs. Silas told her about growing up in Missouri, his mother who'd died when he was 12, his father who'd drunk himself to death after. "We're both orphans." Clara said one night, "Maybe that's why we understand each other." Maybe, but he thought it was more than that. They understood loss, yes, but also survival. The way you could be broken and keep living, scarred and still whole. The way sometimes just getting through another day was its own form of courage. One morning, Clara woke to find Silas carving something by the window. "What are you making?" "Christmas gift." "Forgot it was coming until I saw the calendar." She'd lost track of days entirely. "What date is it?" "December 20th. "Christmas." She said it wonderingly. "I haven't celebrated Christmas since James died." "Neither have I, since the war. But Rachel always said—" He paused, swallowing hard. "Said it was important to mark the good days, to have something to look forward to." Clara moved behind him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "Then we'll celebrate. For Rachel, for us." They prepared with what they had. Clara found some red berries that weren't poisonous, strung them for decoration. Silas shot a wild turkey, a rare treat. They made cornbread stuffing with herbs Clara had dried, boiled wild onions and cattail roots. On Christmas Eve, snow began falling again, gentle this time. They sat by the fire, and Silas gave Clara her gift, a wooden comb he'd carved, delicate as lace. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the intricate design. "Wanted you to have something that was yours, just yours." She kissed him, then disappeared outside despite his protests. She returned with an armload of pine boughs, which she'd somehow woven into a crown. "For the king of the mountain," she said, placing it on his head with mock solemnity. He laughed, really laughed. For the first time since Rachel died. Clara's face lit up at the sound. "There you are," she said softly. "I was wondering where you'd gone." That night, they made love slowly, tenderly, taking time they'd never allowed themselves before. No desperation now, no grief-fueled hunger. Just two people choosing each other, choosing connection over solitude, warmth over winter. As they lay together afterwards, Clara said, "I could stay." Silas went very still. "What?" "I could stay, let them think I died in the mountains, build a life here with you." "Clara." His heart was racing. "You're not thinking clear. Come spring, I'll want to stay even more." She turned in his arms to face him. "I know it's fast. I know we said no promises. But Silas, He kissed her quiet, tasting the words she wouldn't say, couldn't say, not yet. "Ask me again in spring," he said against her lips. "When the snow melts and the world opens up again. When you have choices, ask me then." She nodded, understanding. Winter made everything seem permanent, eternal. They both needed to know this was real, not just two people clinging together against the cold, but in his heart, Silas began to hope. Maybe they could build something here. Maybe Clara could find peace in these mountains, as Rachel had. Maybe, despite all the loss and pain, they could choose to live again. The wind whispered secrets through the pines, and snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in fresh white. Inside the cabin, two scarred souls held each other and dared to dream of spring. The January cold was different from December's, sharper, meaner, with teeth that bit through even the thickest furs. Silas woke one morning to find the water bucket frozen solid and frost painting the inside walls like deadly lace. Clara lay beside him, curled tight for warmth, her breath misting in the frigid air. He slipped from bed carefully, not wanting to wake her, and built up the fire until it roared. The wood supply was running low. He'd need to cut more soon. A dangerous task with snowdrifts reaching halfway up the trees. Clara stirred as the cabin began to warm. "Morning already?" "Sun's up, such as it is." The light filtering through the window was pale and weak, filtered through heavy clouds. "Storm coming, I think." She sat up, pulling the blankets around her shoulders. "Your knee's bothering you again." He hadn't said anything, but she'd learned to read his body like a map. The old war wound always ached before weather changes. "It's nothing." "Liar." She rose, unself-conscious now in her nakedness, and retrieved the liniment she'd made from bear fat and herbs. "Sit." He grumbled but obeyed, letting her work the pungent salve into the twisted scar tissue. Her hands were gentle but firm, knowing exactly where the pain lived. "You should have been a healer," he said. "My grandmother wanted me to be. Said I had the hands for it." She worked in silence for a moment. "Maybe I still could be, after." She didn't finish. After was still a forbidden country between them, full of too many possibilities and dangers. That afternoon, while Clara was mending a torn shirt, they heard it. Horses, multiple horses, moving slow through the snow. Silas grabbed his rifle, checked the load. Clara went white, her hands freezing on the fabric. "The root cellar," he said tersely. "Now! Silas, now! Clara!" She dropped the shirt and ran for the hidden cellar door, disappearing into the dark space beneath the floor. Silas arranged the rug to cover the entrance, then positioned himself by the window. 3 riders came into view, moving carefully through the drifts. Not Theodore's men. Silas could tell by their gear. These were mountain men. Trappers, probably. Rough-looking sorts with frost in their beards and hunger in their faces. He stepped out before they could reach the cabin, rifle easy in his hands, but ready. "That's close enough." The lead rider, a grizzled man missing half an ear, raised his hands peacefully. "No trouble, friend. Just looking for shelter from the storm coming. No room. Trading post is 2 days south. 2 days in this weather's a death sentence." The man's eyes flickered past Silas to the cabin. "Come on, neighbor, Christian charity and all that." "I said no room." The second rider, younger with mean eyes, spoke up. "Awful unfriendly for these parts. Makes a man wonder what you're hiding." Silas shifted the rifle slightly, not quite pointing it, but making the threat clear. "Makes a smart man move along before he finds out." They sat there for a long moment, tension thick as the gathering clouds. Silas had faced down plenty of men in his time, knew how to project the kind of calm menace that made folks reconsider their plans. Finally, the leader spat tobacco juice into the snow. "Come on, boys. Man wants to freeze alone. That's his business." They turned their horses, but Silas caught the look they exchanged. They'd be back, probably at night, thinking to catch him sleeping. He watched until they disappeared into the trees, then went inside. "Clara, wait," he called softly. "Let me check they're gone." He climbed to the loft, peering out the high window that gave a view of the valley. The riders were moving away, but slowly, too slowly. They'd make camp just out of sight. Wait for darkness. Clara emerged from the cellar, cobwebs in her hair. "Were they?" "No, trappers, but trouble all the same." He came back down, thinking fast. "We need to leave, now." "In a storm? Better than waiting for them to come back with ideas about what I'm hiding up here." He touched her face. "They'll think it's gold or furs, but if they find you..." She understood. A woman alone with one man was one thing. A woman alone with 4 men was something else entirely. They packed quickly: food, ammunition, blankets. Silas saddled both horses while Clara dressed in layers of clothing. The storm was already starting, fat flakes beginning to fall. "Where will we go?" Clara asked as they mounted up. "Hunting cabin, I know. Half a day's ride if we push. No one else knows about it." They rode out the back way, through paths Silas had cut that wouldn't be obvious to strangers. The snow began falling harder, which was both blessing and curse. It would cover their tracks, but also made travel treacherous. An hour into the journey, Silas heard what he'd been dreading: hoofbeats behind them. The trappers had decided not to wait for nightfall after all. "Clara, listen to me," he said urgently. "There's a cave about a mile ahead, marked by a lightning-struck pine. If something happens..." "Nothing's going to happen. If something happens," he repeated firmly. "You go there and hide. Wait for spring if you have to. There's supplies cached there. I'm not leaving you." "You will if I tell you to." He pulled Buck around. "Keep going. I'll catch up." "Silas, go!" She went, pushing Molly hard through the deepening snow. Silas found a defensible position among some rocks, waiting. The 3 riders came into view, pushing their horses recklessly through the drifts. He fired a warning shot that took the hat off the youngest one. They scattered, diving for cover, returning fire that chipped stone near his head. Silas stayed calm, picking his shots, making them count. He'd learned patience in the war, knew how to make men think he had more ammunition than he did. But then he heard what made his blood freeze: a scream! Clara's scream! He abandoned his position, spurring Buck toward the sound, found her horse down, leg broken in a hidden hole. Clara trapped beneath, and the mean-eyed trapper standing over her, grinning. Well, this what you were hiding, friend." Silas didn't remember making the choice to charge. One moment he was 30 feet away. The next he was diving off Buck, tackling the man into the snow. They rolled, fighting desperately, both losing their weapons in the struggle. The trapper was younger, stronger, but Silas had been forged in harder fires. He got his hands around the man's throat, bore down with all his weight. The trapper bucked and thrashed, fingers clawing at Silas's face, catching his eye in a burst of pain. But Silas held on until the struggling stopped. When he looked up, the other 2 trappers had arrived. The older one had his rifle trained on Silas. The youngest was eyeing Clara with an expression that made Silas's stomach turn. "Killed my partner," the leader said conversationally. "That's going to cost you." "Let her go. You want supplies. Take them. Want the cabin? It's yours. Just let her go." "Oh, I don't think so." The man smiled, showing broken teeth. "See, winter's long and cold. Man gets lonely." Clara had worked herself free from the dead horse, was backing away slowly. The young trapper moved to cut her off, and that's when she surprised them all. The derringer appeared in her hand like magic. She'd hidden it in her boot. Silas realized. The first shot took the young trapper in the chest. He looked amazed as he fell. The leader swung his rifle toward her, and Silas lunged. The shot went wild as they grappled. This time, Silas got the rifle, used the stock like a club. Once, twice, 3 times until the man stopped moving. Then silence except for their ragged breathing and the whisper of falling snow. "You hurt?" Silas asked. Clara shook her head, though her whole body trembled. Molly. The mare was beyond help, legs shattered. Silas ended her suffering quickly, hating the necessity of it. They took what supplies they could carry from the dead men's horses, then set the animals free. No point in letting good horses die for their master's sins. "Can you ride behind me?" he asked Clara. She nodded, still shaking. He helped her mount Buck, swung up behind her. She leaned back against him, and he could feel the tremors running through her. "You saved my life?" she said quietly. "You saved your own life. Where did you get the derringer?" "William's nightstand. Took it when I ran." A shaky laugh. "He always said women shouldn't have guns. Guess he was right. Look what I did with it. You survived. That's all that matters." They rode through the worsening storm, Clara directing Buck while Silas kept watch behind them. The hunting cabin was barely more than a lean-to, but it was shelter. They cared for Buck, built a small fire, ate cold biscuit in silence. As night fell, Clara finally spoke. "I've never killed anyone before." "It doesn't get easier. I'm not sorry." She looked at him, eyes fierce despite the tears. "Does that make me evil? I killed a man and I'm not sorry. Makes you alive. He would have done worse than kill you." She shuddered, moving closer to him. "When I saw him standing over me, I thought about William, about all the times I couldn't fight back, and I promised myself, never again would I be helpless. You're not helpless. You're one of the strongest people I know. I don't feel strong. I feel—" She struggled for words. "Broken. Like something inside me is fundamentally wrong. Good women don't kill. Good women don't take up with men weeks after their husbands die. Good women survive." Silas interrupted. "Good women protect themselves. Good women choose their own lives instead of letting others choose for them." Clara turned to face him fully. "Is that what I did? Choose you? Didn't you?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then, Yes, I chose you. And I'd choose you again, even knowing it all. The danger, the death, the uncertainty. I'd still choose you." "Clara." "No. Let me say it. I might not get another chance." She took his face in her hands. "I love you. Silas McGraw. I know it's too soon, too complicated, too everything. But I love you. You made me remember I was more than just a thing to be owned. You made me want to live again." He kissed her then, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you too. God help me. I do. Rachel's barely 2 months in the ground and I love you." "She'd understand," Clara said softly. "A woman who loved you that much would want you to live again." They held each other in the drafty cabin while the storm raged outside. In the morning, they'd have to decide, return to Silas's cabin or keep running. But for tonight, they had each other, and they were alive. And sometimes that was miracle enough. Clara fell asleep in his arms, the derringer still tucked in her boot. Silas stayed awake, keeping watch, thinking about the bodies they'd left in the snow. Come spring, someone would find them. There might be questions, investigations, but that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, he had Clara warm against him, Buck safe in the lean-to, and the knowledge that they'd faced death together and won. In this hard country, sometimes that was all you could ask for. The storm began to break near dawn, stars appearing between the clouds. A good omen. Maybe, or maybe just weather. Either way, they'd survived another night, in the mountains in winter, with enemies at every turn. That was no small thing. "Spring," Clara murmured in her sleep. "Wait for spring. We'll make it," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was promising her or himself. "We'll make it to spring." The morning after the storm dawned crystal clear, the kind of sharp blue day that only comes after blizzards. Ice crystals hung in the air like suspended diamonds, and every branch bore a coat of pristine white. Silas stood outside the lean-to, studying their back trail, but the storm had erased everything. No one would find those bodies until spring thaw. "It's beautiful," Clara said, joining him. She'd washed her face with snow, and her cheeks were pink with cold. Like the world's been made new. Maybe it has. He took her hand. Decision made. Let's go home. The journey back to his cabin took most of the day, Buck picking his way carefully through the deep drifts. They rode in comfortable silence, Clara's body warm against his chest, her presence now as natural as breathing. When they finally crested the ridge above the cabin, both exhaled in relief. No smoke from the chimney, no tracks in the snow. Their home was untouched. That evening, as Clara prepared a simple meal from their remaining supplies, Silas watched her move around the cabin with new eyes. She'd changed in the weeks since he'd found her. The hunted look had faded, replaced by something stronger. She still checked the windows, still kept the Derringer close, but she no longer jumped at every sound. "What are you thinking?" she asked, catching his stare. "That you look like you belong here." She smiled, the expression transforming her face. "I feel like I do. Is that strange?" "I've never belonged anywhere before." After supper, as they sat by the fire, Silas made a decision. "I want to show you something tomorrow. A place Rachel loved. Will you come?" Clara studied his face, understanding the significance of the offer. "If you're sure." "I'm sure." The next morning dawned clear again, warmer than it had been in weeks. They packed a lunch and set out on foot, following a trail only Silas knew. It wound up through stands of aspen and pine, across a frozen creek, up a challenging slope that had Clara breathing hard despite her improved stamina. Almost there, Silas encouraged, helping her over a fallen log. They emerged onto a small plateau that overlooked the entire valley. The view was breathtaking, mountains stretching endlessly in every direction, their peaks touched with alpenglow. A small spring bubbled up from the rocks, staying liquid even in winter through some geological miracle. "Oh," Clara breathed, turning in a slow circle. "Oh, Silas." Rachel called it her cathedral, said it was where she felt closest to God. He pointed to a flat rock near the spring. She'd sit there for hours, just thinking, planning our future. Clara moved to the rock, ran her hands over its smooth surface. "Tell me about those plans." So he did, the words coming easier than expected. Rachel had wanted to build a proper house with real windows and a wooden floor, a garden terraced into the hillside, children, at least 3, she'd said, to fill the mountain silence with laughter, maybe even a small school. Eventually, for other settlers' children. She had such hope. He finished. Even when things were hard, she always believed they'd get better. "She sounds wonderful." Clara turned to face him. "You know I can never be her, don't you? I'm too damaged, too cynical. I'll never have that kind of pure faith." "Don't want you to be her." Silas moved closer, taking her hands. "Want you to be you, the woman who survived what would have killed most people, who learned to shoot to protect herself, who makes terrible cornbread but never gives up trying." Clara laughed, tears starting down her cheeks. "The cornbread's getting better." "It is." He wiped her tears with his thumbs. "Clara, I need to tell you something. That first night, when I found you, I wasn't planning to save you." She went still. "What?" "I was ready to die. Had been since Rachel passed. Figured I'd just stop eating. Let the cold take me. Then I found you, and suddenly, I had a reason to keep going. Not for me, for you, because you needed help." He struggled to find the right words. "You saved me as much as I saved you. More, maybe." "Silas, I'm not telling you this to burden you. Just want you to know. You brought me back to life." She pulled him down for a kiss, fierce and desperate. "When they broke apart," she said, "we saved each other. That's what people do, isn't it? Save each other?" They stayed on the plateau until afternoon, sharing their lunch, talking about everything and nothing. Clara told him about her favorite books, her dreams of seeing an ocean. Silas described places he'd seen during the war, cities and rivers and endless fields of grain. "Maybe we could see them together," Clara said tentatively. "Someday, when it's safe." Maybe we could. As they prepared to leave, Clara suddenly grabbed his arm. Look! A golden eagle circled overhead, riding the thermals with effortless grace. They watched in silence as it soared higher and higher, until it was just a speck against the blue. Rachel said eagles were God's promise that we could rise above anything, Silas said softly. Clara squeezed his hand. I think she was right. The trip back down was easier, both of them lighter somehow. As they neared the cabin, Clara suddenly stopped. Silas, I need to tell you something. About William. About our wedding night. You don't have to. Yes, I do. If this is going to be real, you need to know. She took a deep breath. He was cruel. Not just rough. Cruel. Like he enjoyed hurting me. And when I fought back, when I tried to make him stop, that's when his heart gave out. The doctor said it was natural, that his heart was weak. But I know the truth. The strain of attacking me killed him. Good. Clara looked up, startled. What? Good. I'm glad he's dead. Glad you fought back. Wish I could have killed him myself for hurting you. You don't think I'm tainted? Dirty? Silas pulled her close. I think you're the bravest woman I've ever known, and anyone who made you feel otherwise was a fool and a coward. That night, their lovemaking was different, slower, deeper, with a tenderness born of true intimacy. They knew each other now, not just bodies, but souls. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a vow they couldn't speak aloud. Afterwards, as they lay entwined, Clara said, I want to plant a garden come spring, like Rachel planned, terraced into the hillside. That would be good. And maybe we could build onto the cabin. Just a small addition. A room for... She trailed off, suddenly shy. For children, someday, if we're blessed. Silas's heart constricted. You want children? After what happened with your daughter? Because of what happened. She deserved to live, to be loved. Maybe I can't have her back. But I could love another child, protect them, give them what she never had. She turned to look at him. Would you want that? Children with me? Yes. The word came without thought, straight from his heart. Yes, I'd want that. They were quiet for a while, imagining a future neither had dared dream of. Then Clara asked, what if Theodore finds us? What if we build all this and he comes to destroy it? Then we'll face him together, like we faced those trappers. I'm serious. Silas, I'm still legally his father's widow. He has the law on his side. Silas considered this. There's a judge in Denver. Honest man, or was when I knew him. Come spring, we could go see him. Tell him your story. Maybe there's a legal way to free you. And if there isn't, then we go to California or Oregon. Somewhere far enough that Theodore Whitmore becomes just a bad memory. You do that? Leave everything behind for me? Clara, you are everything. This cabin, this mountain, it's just a place. You're home now. She cried then, quiet tears that soaked into his chest. He held her, understanding. Neither of them had expected this. To find love again, to dare hope for a future. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. The next weeks passed in a blur of ordinary moments made precious by their newfound certainty. They worked side by side, preparing for the remainder of winter. Silas taught Clara to set snares, to read weather signs, to navigate by stars. She taught him to write more words, to cook something besides basic trail food, to laugh again. One evening, as Clara was darning socks by the fire, she suddenly said, I've been thinking about names. Names? For children, if we have them. She kept her eyes on her work, but Silas could see her blush. Rachel, if it's a girl, for her, would that be all right? Silas's throat closed. That would be, yes, she'd like that. And James for a boy. For my first husband. He was a good man. Deserves to be remembered. Rachel and James. Good names. Clara finally looked up, her expression vulnerable. We're really doing this, aren't we? Planning a life together? If you'll have me. She set aside the darning and came to him, settling into his lap with a naturalness that still amazed him. I'll have you, Silas McGraw, today, tomorrow, and all the days after, even when I'm grumpy in the mornings, especially then. She kissed him softly. I love you, scars and all, and I love you, strength and all. They sat together as night fell, watching the fire burn low. Outside, the wind sang through the pines, but inside was warmth and safety, and the quiet miracle of two broken hearts learning to beat as one. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Winter was far from over, and spring would bring decisions that couldn't be avoided forever. Theodore Whitmore was still out there, still hunting. The world beyond their mountain haven hadn't changed, but tonight they had each other. They had love, unexpected and hard-won. They had hope for a future neither had imagined possible. And in the end, that was everything. The day started like any other, with fresh snow falling gentle as prayers. Clara was kneading dough for the day's bread while Silas cleaned his rifle by the window. Neither of them heard the horses until it was too late. Silas McGraw, the voice boomed across the clearing, authoritative and cold. Come out peaceable and nobody needs to get hurt. Clara froze, her flour-dusted hands clutching the table edge. Through the window! Silas counted 3 men on horseback, all armed. The speaker was tall, well-dressed despite the mountain conditions. Had to be Theodore Whitmore. The family resemblance to William was clear in his sharp features and cruel mouth. Get to the cellar, Silas said quietly, not taking his eyes off the men. No. Clara's voice was steady. Not this time. We face this together. Clara. Together. Silas. He saw the determination in her eyes and knew arguing was useless. Instead, he checked his rifle, made sure the spare ammunition was within reach. Clara retrieved the derringer from her boot, checked its load. I know she's in there. McGraw, Theodore called. My father's widow. She's wanted for murder, and you're harboring a fugitive. Silas stepped out onto the porch, rifle held casual but ready. Don't know what you're talking about. Friend, just me up here. Theodore smiled, an expression devoid of warmth. Really? Then you won't mind if we search the place. Make sure you're not hiding stolen goods or other things. Mind very much. This is private property. Not for long. Theodore produced a paper from his coat. Warrant for Clara Whitmore's arrest, and authorization to search any premises where she might be hiding. Let me see that warrant. Come get it. It was a trap, obvious as a snare in snow. Step off the porch and they'd rush him. Silas calculated distances, angles. 3 men, spread too wide to take all at once, and Clara inside, vulnerable if he fell. I'm coming out. Clara's voice made everyone freeze. She stepped onto the porch, head high despite the tremor in her hands. I'm the one you want. Theodore, leave Mr. McGraw out of this. Clara, no. She touched Silas's arm, a gesture of reassurance and farewell. It's all right. To Theodore, she said, I'll come peacefully. Just give me a moment to gather my things. Theodore's eyes narrowed. No tricks, woman. You've led us a merry chase. But it's over now. No tricks. Clara agreed. She turned to go inside, and that's when Silas saw it. The slight shift in Theodore's posture, the way his hand moved toward his pistol. Not planning to take her back for trial, planning to kill her here, claims she tried to escape. Down! Silas shoved Clara aside as Theodore drew. The shot splintered wood where her head had been. Silas brought his rifle up, fired in one smooth motion. Theodore jerked, clutching his shoulder, his pistol falling into the snow. The other 2 men went for their guns. Clara fired the derringer from the porch floor, catching one in the chest. Silas levered another round, dropped the second man as he tried to flank them. Then sudden pain exploded through Silas's side. Theodore, wounded but not out, had pulled a second gun. Silas stumbled, his rifle slipping from numb fingers. No! Clara scrambled for the fallen rifle as Theodore advanced. his face twisted with pain and rage. "You killed my father, you witch! Now you've corrupted this fool too!" He aimed at Clara, savoring the moment. "Any last words?" Clara raised the rifle, her eyes steady. "Yes, go to hell." The shot echoed across the mountains. Theodore looked surprised as the red stain spread across his chest. He took one step, then another, then fell face first into the snow. Silence descended, broken only by Silas's ragged breathing. Clara dropped the rifle and crawled to him, her hands already red with his blood. "No, no, no!" She pressed her palm against the wound in his side. "Stay with me. You stay with me. Silas McGraw." "Clara," the world was going gray at the edges. "You need to run. There might be more. I'm not leaving you." She half dragged him inside, surprisingly strong in her desperation. "Don't you dare die on me. Don't you dare." The next hours passed in a haze of pain and fever. Clara worked with desperate efficiency, cleaning the wound, packing it with moss and whiskey. The bullet had passed through, missing vital organs by inches. Lucky, if you could call any of this luck. She talked constantly as she worked, as if her voice could anchor him to life. Stories about her grandmother, songs half remembered, pleas and promises and threats if he dared to leave her. "I won't bury another person I love," she said fiercely. "You hear me? I won't do it." Silas faded in and out. Sometimes Rachel was there, standing in the corner, smiling sadly. "Not yet," she seemed to say. "Not your time yet." Other times it was Clara's face, streaked with tears and blood, beautiful in its determination. On the third day, his fever broke. He woke to find Clara asleep in the chair beside the bed, still holding his hand. She'd aged years in days, dark circles under her eyes, but she was there, solid, real, alive. "Clara." Her eyes snapped open. For a moment, she just stared, as if afraid to believe. Then she was kissing his face, his hands, sobbing and laughing at once. "You stupid, brave fool. You wonderful, infuriating man. If you ever scare me like that again—" "Love you too," he managed, which made her cry harder. Over the next days, as Silas slowly healed, they pieced together what needed to be done. The bodies couldn't stay where they'd fallen. Clara insisted on proper burial, even for Theodore. They were wrong, maybe even evil. She said, but they were still men, still somebody's sons. They found letters on Theodore's body, correspondence with a Pinkerton detective agency, promises of reward money, detailed plans for tracking Clara through the mountains, but also something else, a letter from a lawyer in Denver, suggesting the inheritance case wasn't as clear-cut as Theodore claimed. "He was going to kill me anyway," Clara said wonderingly. "Even if the law was on his side, he couldn't risk me telling my story in court." "It's over now," Silas said. "He can't hurt you anymore." But Clara shook her head. "There'll be questions when he doesn't come back. The Pinkertons will send someone else. Then we'll be ready. Or we run, start fresh somewhere new." Silas considered this as he watched her move around the cabin, tending him with gentle hands. "Is that what you want? To run?" "I want to live," she said simply. "With you. Wherever that is. Here, California. The moon if we could get there. Place doesn't matter. You do." As Silas grew stronger, they prepared for whatever came next. Clara practiced with the rifle until she could hit targets at 100 yards. They stockpiled ammunition, reinforced the cabin's defenses, made plans for escape routes if needed. But they also lived, planted seeds in pots to start the spring garden, finished the quilt Clara had been piecing together from scraps, read poetry by the fire, and made love in the quiet hours before dawn. One evening, as they sat watching sunset paint the mountains gold, Clara said, "I've been thinking about those names we discussed." "Oh? Maybe we should add Theodore to the list, for a middle name." At Silas's startled look, she explained, not for him, but as a reminder that even the worst moments can lead to something better, that we can choose to be different than those who hurt us. "Rachel Clara for a girl," Silas said slowly. "James Theodore for a boy." building something good from all our ghosts. He pulled her close, marveling at her strength. This woman who'd survived so much yet still chose hope, still chose love, still chose to see redemption possible even in their enemies' names. "Marry me," he said suddenly. "Not someday, now, as soon as I can travel." Clara turned in his arms. "Silas, I know we can't make it legal yet, not with the warrant, but we can speak vows before God and these mountains, make promises that matter more than any paper. Yes." No hesitation, just that single, perfect word. "Yes, I'll marry you." They were married 2 weeks later at Clara's cathedral, the plateau where Rachel had once dreamed her dreams. Silas wore his best shirt, cleaned and mended. Clara wore Rachel's blue dress with wildflowers in her hair. No preacher, no witnesses except the eagles circling overhead. Just two people speaking promises they meant to keep. "I, Silas McGraw, take you, Clara, to be my wife, to love and protect, to stand beside through whatever comes. I promise to see you as you are, not as others would make you, but as the woman who saved me. From this day forward, you are my home, my heart, my choice in all things." "I, Clara." She paused, then smiled. "I, Clara McGraw, choose you, Silas, as my husband. I promise to face whatever comes with courage, to build a life of joy despite our sorrows, to love you not in spite of your scars, but because of how they've shaped you. From this day forward, you are my shelter, my strength, my partner in all things." They exchanged rings made from horseshoe nails Silas had shaped, humble but honest. As they kissed, snow began to fall, gentle as a blessing. That night, in their bed that was now truly theirs, Clara whispered, "Do you think they're watching, Rachel and James?" "I think they're happy we found each other." Silas replied, "I think love honors love, however it comes." She traced the healing wound on his side. "We almost lost this, almost lost everything. But we didn't. We're here. We're alive. We have tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after." Clara agreed. Outside, wolves howled in the distance, but the sound no longer seemed threatening. Just another part of the mountain symphony, the wild music of survival and freedom. Inside, two hearts beat in rhythm. Two souls rested in hard-won peace. The future remained uncertain. Come spring, decisions would need to be made. The law might come calling. The world below the mountains would intrude eventually. But for now, in the warm circle of their bed, with the fire crackling and snow falling soft as promises, Silas and Clara McGraw held each other and dared to believe in tomorrow. They'd fought for this, bled for it, killed for it, and by God, they would live for it too. The mountain had taken much from both of them, but it had also given them each other. In the end, that was more than either had dared hope for. It was enough. It was everything. Spring came slowly to the mountains, first as a whisper in the warming wind, then as patches of brown earth showing through the melting snow. Clara stood in the doorway of the cabin, one hand resting on her still flat belly, watching Silas work on the garden terraces they'd planned all winter. "You shouldn't be lifting those rocks," she called. "Your side is healed," he finished, setting another stone in place. "Been 2 months. Clara, I'm not made of glass." She smiled, knowing it was useless to argue. The wound had healed clean, leaving only another scar to add to his collection. But she still woke sometimes, remembering the blood on her hands, the terrible fear that she'd lose him. "Come see," Silas said, stepping back to survey his work. "Tell me if it's how you pictured it." Clara picked her way across the muddy ground, marveling at the transformation. Where once had been a steep slope, 3 neat terraces now stepped down the hillside, ready for planting. It was exactly as she'd imagined, exactly as Rachel had once dreamed. "It's perfect," she said, slipping her arm through his. She would have loved it. They stood quietly for a moment, remembering. Then Clara took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "I felt something this morning, just a flutter, like butterfly wings. But I think it's real." Silas's face transformed with wonder. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be. My grandmother said quickening comes around 4 months. The timing's right. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. A baby. We're having a baby. Scared? Terrified, he admitted, but happy. So happy I can barely breathe with it. They'd discovered her pregnancy just weeks after the confrontation with Theodore. Clara's monthly courses failing to arrive on schedule. At first, she'd been afraid to hope, remembering her lost daughter. But as the weeks passed and the signs grew stronger, cautious joy had bloomed. That evening, as they prepared the garden beds for planting, a rider appeared on the trail below. Both tensed, hands moving to weapons that were never far away now, but the rider was alone, moving openly, hands visible. Hello, the cabin. The voice was young, nervous. Looking for Silas McGraw. Silas stepped forward, rifle ready but not aimed. You found him. The rider was barely more than a boy, maybe 17. Got a letter for you, sir. From Denver. Clara and Silas exchanged glances. They'd written to Judge Patterson, the honest man Silas remembered, telling Clara's story and asking for advice. This might be their answer. The boy handed over the letter, clearly eager to be gone. The judge said to wait for a reply, if you've got one. Silas broke the seal, read quickly, his expression shifting from worry to wonder. Clara, listen to this. Have investigated the matter thoroughly. William Whitmore's will, properly filed and witnessed, leaves everything to his wife Clara, with no provisions for contest. Theodore Whitmore acted without legal authority in pursuing Mrs. Whitmore. Furthermore, given the circumstances of William Whitmore's death as described by the attending physician, no charges will be filed. Clara's knees nearly buckled. It's over? Truly over? There's more. I've taken the liberty of filing documentation of Theodore Whitmore's death as self-defense, supported by evidence of his hired killers and clear intent to harm. Mrs. Whitmore is free to claim her inheritance whenever she wishes. However, given the circumstances, I might suggest a quiet life elsewhere would be more comfortable for all concerned. He's offering us a way out. Clara breathed. Take the money and disappear. Is that what you want? Clara looked around, at the cabin that had become home, the garden waiting to be planted, the mountains that had sheltered them. I want to stay. Is that foolish? We could go anywhere, do anything with William's money. But I want to stay here, where we became us. Silas kissed her forehead. Then we stay. Tell the judge thank you, but Mrs. McGraw is happy where she is. The boy's eyes widened. McGraw, but I thought... Mrs. Clara McGraw. Clara said firmly, as of this winter. You can tell Judge Patterson that too. As the rider departed with their reply and a legal document Clara signed relinquishing all claim to the Whitmore fortune, Silas asked, No regrets? That money could buy a lot of comfort. I've got all the comfort I need, Clara replied, taking his hand. Besides, it was never really mine. Let William's cousins fight over it. I've got better things to grow than a bank account. The spring days passed in a blur of activity. They planted the garden, vegetables and herbs, flowers for beauty and remembrance. Clara's belly grew rounder, the life inside her becoming more real with each kick and turn. Silas built a cradle from pine, carving tiny birds and flowers into the wood. One afternoon, as Clara was hanging laundry, she heard horses again. This time, it was a small group, 2 women and a man, travel-worn but smiling. Hello, one of the women called. We're the Millers. Heard there might be good land up this way for homesteading. And so their isolation began to end. The Millers settled in the next valley over. Close enough for occasional visits, but far enough for privacy. By midsummer, 2 more families had arrived, drawn by tales of good water and game-rich forests. We're becoming a community. Clara marveled one evening as they returned from helping raise the Millers' cabin. Never thought I'd see it. Mind it? Silas asked. No, it's good to have neighbors, especially with the baby coming. She rubbed her back, which ached constantly now. Mrs. Miller knows midwifing. She'll be a help when my time comes. That time came on a crystal-clear morning in early September, Clara waking Silas with a gasp. I think it's starting. The next hours were a blur of pain and fear and determination. Mrs. Miller arrived as promised, calm and competent. Silas paced like a caged bear until Clara demanded he stay with her, gripping his hand through each wave of agony. "You're doing fine, honey," Mrs. Miller soothed. "Baby's coming just right. Won't be long now." But long was relative when every moment stretched like hours. Clara fought through the pain, drawing on the same strength that had carried her through everything else. And finally, as the sun touched the mountain peaks, a new cry split the air. "It's a girl," Mrs. Miller announced, cleaning the baby quickly before placing her on Clara's chest. "A perfect little girl." Clara wept as she held her daughter, alive, breathing, perfect. Silas touched the baby's tiny hand with one trembling finger, his own eyes wet. "Rachel?" Clara whispered. "Rachel Clara McGraw. She's beautiful," Silas managed, just like her mother. Little Rachel was indeed beautiful, a shock of dark hair like Clara's, eyes that would surely be green, and a grip that promised she'd inherited her parents' strength. She nursed eagerly, slept contentedly, and wrapped both parents around her tiny fingers within hours. That night, as Clara dozed with the baby, Silas stepped outside. The stars were bright overhead, the mountain air sweet with pine and possibility. He walked to Rachel's grave, knelt in the grass that now covered it. "We named her for you," he said quietly. "Hope that's all right. She'll know about you, about how you saved me so I could save Clara, so we could make this little one." He touched the wooden marker. "Thank you. For everything." A warm breeze stirred, carrying the scent of the wild roses Clara had planted by the grave. Silas took it as a blessing. The autumn days were golden, filled with baby cries and laughter. Clara recovered quickly, soon back to her usual work with Rachel tied to her chest in a sling. Silas found himself stopping often just to watch them, his girls, his miracles, his reasons for living. The other families visited often, bringing food and company. The women cooed over Rachel, sharing advice and stories. The men helped Silas add a room to the cabin, proper space for a growing family. "Never thought I'd have this," Clara confided one evening as they sat by the fire, Rachel sleeping between them. "A real home, neighbors who accept me, a husband who sees me as a partner, not property." She touched Silas's face. "And you? Is this the life you wanted?" "It's more," he said honestly. "More than I ever dared dream after Rachel died. You brought me back to life. Clara, you and this little one." "We brought each other back," she corrected. "That's what love does, isn't it? Makes us brave enough to live again." Winter came gentle that year, the snow falling soft and steady. They spent long evenings by the fire, Silas reading aloud while Clara nursed Rachel. The poetry books were joined by children's stories now, tales of adventure and wonder for when Rachel was old enough to understand. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell outside and Rachel slept in her cradle, Clara and Silas exchanged simple gifts, new gloves she'd knitted for him, a wooden hair comb he'd carved for her. But the real gift was the life they'd built, the love they'd found, the future stretching bright before them. "Next year she'll be walking," Clara said, watching their daughter sleep. "Getting into everything, probably trying to eat dirt from the garden." "Teaching her to ride," Silas added. "To read, to shoot when she's older. To be strong," Clara said. "To know her own mind. To never let anyone make her small. To be like her mother." Like both her parents, survivors, they sat in comfortable silence, hands entwined, watching the fire and dreaming of tomorrows. Outside, the mountains stood eternal, guardians of this small cabin where two broken people had built something whole. Spring would come again, bringing new growth to the garden, new families to the valleys, new challenges to face, but also bringing Rachel's first words, first steps, first exploration of the world beyond the cabin walls. There would be siblings, God willing. More laughter, more love, more life than either had thought possible. "I used to think the mountain took everything from me," Silas said quietly. "But it gave me you. It gave me this. The mountain didn't give us anything, Clara replied. We gave each other. We chose to live, to love, to try again despite everything. That's not the mountain's gift. It's ours. She was right, as usual. They'd saved each other, healed each other, chosen each other against all odds. And now, in this cabin filled with warmth and love and possibility, they were writing a new story. Not one without pain, their scars would always remain, but one where pain was transformed by love, where loss led to finding, where two souls who touched death chose life instead. Rachel stirred in her sleep, making small, contented sounds. Her parents watched her, seeing in her tiny face all their hopes made flesh. She would know both her namesake's stories. She would understand that she came from courage, from love that conquered fear, from people who refused to let tragedy have the final word. Happy? Silas asked. More than happy, Clara replied. Grateful, amazed, blessed. Good words. The best words. And in the warmth of their mountain home, surrounded by love and touched by grace, the McGraw family faced their future unafraid. They'd been buried by sorrow, frozen by loss, hunted by those who would destroy them. But they'd survived. More than survived. They'd bloomed like wildflowers in spring, proof that even in the harshest ground, love could take root and grow. The fire crackled, the baby sighed, and two hearts that had once thought themselves dead beat strong and sure, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Thank you all for joining us around the campfire to hear this tale of love blooming in the harsh mountain wilderness. We'd love to hear where you're listening from, whether it's a big city apartment or your own mountain cabin. Please subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of frontier romance and adventure. And share your thoughts about Silas and Clara's journey in the comments below. Until next time, partners.